we have put a presentation together, and I hope this is going to meet your expectations, but this is pharmacovigilance in general. We didn't necessarily go into specifics about pharmacovigilance. That can be a topic that we can cover in the one of the webinars where we can be invited. So today we're going to do a general talk about pharmacovigilance, but our main focus, it's mostly on regulatory functions within SABRA, and then we'll touch a little on others as well. Okay, so this is the contents of my presentation. I will not be going much into detail through this. And I will start by saying a little about the organization that I represent, and then moving further into pharmacovigilance. So as we may all know, that SABRA is the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority. It was established in 2018. SABRA is actually an independent entity that reports to the National Minister of Health through its board. And it regulates the human medicines, including the animal medicines. And through Section 2B of the Medicines Act, which is Act 101 of 1965, as amended, as many of you would know it like that, it requires that SABRA ensures that there's efficient, there's effective, and ethical assessment and regulation of health products that meet defined standards of quality, safety, efficacy, and performance. So performance, basically, we're relating more into the medical devices and the IVDs. And then SABRA also needs to ensure that there's transparent, there's fairness and objectivity, and timeous assessment and registration of medicines as we receive them in the system. Furthermore, there's periodic re-evaluations and reassessment and ongoing monitoring of products in the marketplace, and investigate and monitor any existing and new adverse drug reactions, interaction signals that are emerging from the post-marketing surveillance, as well as ensure compliance through active inspections and investigations. In so doing, then, lastly, ensure the assessment of clinical trials and the performance thereof according to the study protocols, according to prescribed scientific and ethical criteria, professional and ethical criteria, and the defined standards. So in executing its mandate or its function, then the authority may enter into an agreement in order to cooperate with any other regulatory authority in order to achieve its objectives. So that's the little that I will say about the organization that I represent. So in terms of the global regulatory practice principles, SABRA also subscribes to those global good regulatory, as we have highlighted that we are legally based in the act, with the Act, and then as well there's consistency in terms of the decisions that are made, there's impartiality in those decisions, proportionality and clarity, efficiency, and we are independent. We ensure that we are independent in making a decision, we are flexible, and ensure transparency in terms of the decisions that are taken within the organization. So I will move into the monitoring of adverse drug reactions and the adverse events following immunization. And that's the part that basically we will be concentrating more on, and that's pharmacovigilance. And pharmacovigilance in simple terms basically is drug safety. So pharmacon basically it's equals to a drug, and vigilare is to keep watch, hence the name pharmacovigilance. So this basically, it talks to being vigilant towards the drugs that we have. And basically, according to WHO, it is defined as the science and the activities relating to detection, to assessment, understanding and prevention of adverse drug events and any other drug-related problems. So what's important to understand with this definition is that pharmacovigilance doesn't necessarily speak to adverse effects only. It further says any other drug-related problem, be it overdose, be it medication error, be it falsified medication, quality issues, that speaks to pharmacovigilance as a whole. We're not only looking at the adverse drug reaction or suspected adverse drug reactions. So that's according to WHO, the importance of pharmacovigilance. So I thought I should actually provide a historical evolution of pharmacovigilance, just so we can provide context into understanding where pharmacovigilance started. So pharmacovigilance basically, even then, when it started, it was not necessarily named pharmacovigilance. There was no specific name. However, these are some of the events that led to the development of medicine regulatory worldwide, and as well as pharmacovigilance being part of the medicine regulatory. So in 1848, there was a little girl of 15-year-old known as Hannah, who unfortunately had to go a procedure with an anesthetic that contained chloroform. And this was a healthy girl who, due to chloroform, unfortunately demised following the removal of the toenail. So this is where now there was gathering of information towards medicine safety, towards medicine regulation. And this is the first incident that could be recognized and documented that led to pharmacovigilance and medicine regulatory as a whole. And then following that, in 1937 in the USA, there was an Alexia, which was an antimicrobial that actually had to be made in elixir form, actually the antibiotic. And then this, unfortunately, it was done with 70% diethyl glycol, and which led to the death of over 100 people in the USA. So following that in 1938, then the USDA realized that there's a need for medicine regulation to be in place. Hence, then the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was established and the public health system was renovated. Then in 1955, the acetylsalicylic acid, it was recognized that it actually has gastrointestinal toxicity, which was then proven in 1955. And in 1961, following that, which is what is normally known in pharmacovigilance as the history of pharmacovigilance, is the issue that relates to the tragedy of the thalidomide, where a medicine was used in pregnant women for nausea and vomiting. And unfortunately, it resulted with a number of situations whereby the babies were either aborted, then as well as the limbs which could not develop, resulting with phacomelia, and that was used in about 46 countries. And this is actually where the birth of pharmacovigilance now became very evident, and the medicine regulation in general. So from then there was the development of the yellow card system in the UK. And the yellow card system, basically, it's a system that is monitoring the adverse drug reaction. It's a reporting system that is being used in the UK. Hence, if you remember, the yellow card, the ADR reporting form used to be yellow in color, and this is where it was actually coming from, hence the yellow card system, and the ADR reporting form was then yellow, even in South Africa. And linking to this is where now our Act of 1965 came as well into place in South Africa. Then this is where now the world became aware of pharmacovigilance, of medicine regulation, and its implementation and its importance. And then following on, then the European legislation was developed, and the WHO program for international drug monitoring was instituted, where 10 countries, they came together to form this WHO international program for monitoring of drugs. And then in 1999, that's when the EMA was actually established. And 2001, they had a system that they call the Vigilance. They funded it in the Europe so that it can actually be used to collect the adverse drug reactions. And then in 2012, then the new European pharmacovigilance legislation came into play, and then new vigilance system format came into play in 2017, and then taking it more locally. Now we are in the process of establishing the Afro-Vigilance, whereby African countries are now coming together to do exactly what the European have done, to develop a pharmacovigilance system that speaks to Africa as a whole, not necessarily relying into the European countries' information. Then in terms of pharmacovigilance, we have aims that we want to achieve. So what is it that we are aiming with pharmacovigilance? So firstly is detection of unknown adverse reactions and interactions. And okay, due to my internet being unstable, I am going to switch my video, unfortunately. Okay. So in terms of the aims of pharmacovigilance, number one, it's early detection of unknown adverse reactions and interactions. So it's important that we understand that when you talk of early detection of unknown, normally the unknown are more related to new chemical entities that have actually came into the market. So it's very important that adverse drug reactions that we are seeing with new medicines, they need to be reported because these are some of the things that in most cases, they are unknown and the interactions as well, they are unknown. And then secondly, the aim is to ensure detection of increases in the frequency of known adverse reactions as well. So this talks to adverse reactions that already we know about them. They are actually in the product label. We are aware that this particular medicine, it causes this particular adverse reaction, but because we want to know the frequency, as healthcare professionals, you should be aware that in the professional information, there's frequency tables that talks to the adverse drug reactions. So this as well is affected by the reports that we receive to say, now this thing does not necessarily occur rarely, but maybe now it's common based on the reactions that on the reports that we are receiving for that particular adverse reactions. Then thirdly, identification of risk factors and possible mechanisms underlying the adverse drug reactions. So in certain instances, you would understand that certain medication can be used in pregnancy, in the elderly, in those with renal failure or reduced renal function. So it's the whole idea to see this kind of reactions that needs to be identified as well as relayed and communicated to healthcare professionals and the public. And lastly, estimation of quantitative aspects of benefit risk analysis and dissemination of information needed to improve drug prescribing as well. Okay. Okay, so what is the ultimate goal? What is the objectives then? Number one is patient care. We want to improve patient care and safety in relation to medicines and all medical and paramedical interventions. Number two is public health, to improve public health and safety in relation to the use of medicines, and risk-benefit analysis, contribute to the assessment of benefit, harm, effectiveness, and risk of medicines. And lastly, to communicate, promote understanding, clinical training, effective communications to healthcare professionals and the public in general. So what activities are actually involved in pharmacovigilance? So pharmacovigilance, basically we start with collection, and then the collection is actually from healthcare professionals that are on the ground that have interactions with the public, with the patients. So as they do the in clinical practice, basically, they will identify the adverse drug reactions or the possible suspected adverse drug reactions, and then they collect that, and then they send to SAPRA or whichever channel of communication that maybe at the provincial level that it would be in place, and then they will collect it as at a single place. And collation then, and collation basically, it can be at the hospital deciding that we are taking all our reports here and then we look at them. It can be at the district level, at the provincial level, up until it reaches SAPRA, where now it's a national level and we receive all the adverse drug reactions from all provinces. And then there's analysis of these reports that have been received. And then in terms of the analysis, this is where now we are trying to see what is the performance of this product in general, and then we do assessment. How relevant is this? Do we need more data? Do we need to set up more information collective mechanisms, maybe that are more specific and robust compared to the spontaneous reporting? And then we do signal detection, whereby in terms of statistics, we can see that there's a possibility of a signal existing between this particular drug and this reaction. And with signal, basically, we're talking to new information pertaining to a specific drug, or it can even be something that we know, but we were not sure. And then now we are having more information to support what we've been suspecting. And then once we do that, then we issue a communication in terms of the changes in the risk-benefit balance. This can be in a form of a Dear Healthcare Professional letter that are issued to healthcare professionals. It can be in a form of a patient information leaflet being updated. It can be an educational program that needs to be in place for either healthcare professionals or the patients. It can be a media release or statement that we issue to inform the public about a specific safety concern that we have identified or a decision that has been taken. And then in this way, then it leads to prevention of adverse drug reactions moving forward, and the process then restarts all over again. Okay, so now the question is, do we think spontaneous reporting is still relevant? And other people would feel that maybe it's not really irrelevant. However, a hideous monster is not listed in as a possible adverse drug reactions, hence the need for spontaneous reporting. As much as spontaneous reporting is not robust enough, however, it has been proven that many of the safety regulatory decisions that have been done worldwide, about 55% of them, they're actually as a result of spontaneous reporting, because these are the reports that are coming mostly directly from healthcare professionals who understand the patients and the patient themselves robust enough. Then further studies, they can be put in place so that they can support the adverse event that has been suspected. So I've got a few shortcuts for you. Number one is that in the USA, about 100,000 deaths, they actually occur per year as a result of adverse drug reactions. And this is actually the 4th highest cause of mortality in the USA, and that's according to Lazaro. And then furthermore, about 4 medication errors, they actually occur in 1,000 medicine orders that actually take place, and that's according to the IOM report. Then medication error or adverse event, they actually occur in 50% of surgical procedures, and that's as per the Mass General Hospital. And lastly, to bring it more even home, is to say that approximately 6 to 8% of patients, and that's as per Meta and Mouton. And this, we're talking excluding overdoses, drug abuse related reactions, and medication errors. Then in so saying, then what is the scope then of pharmacovigilance? Then with regards to the scope of pharmacovigilance, I've highlighted earlier that we're not only looking at the suspected adverse drug reactions, but we're looking as well as the events themselves. So what is the difference between an adverse drug reaction and an event? If you look on my right-hand side, I have a diagram that shows an event being a bigger bubble compared to adverse drug reactions. So the difference between the two is that an event, it will occur following the use of a particular medicine, but not necessarily having a causal relation with that particular medicine. So an adverse drug reaction then will have a causal reaction. But what's important to note is that an adverse drug reaction, for as long as it's not yet confirmed, then it's referred to be suspected. Up until such point, then we can confirm. But still, that will be falling under the adverse drug reaction until proven otherwise. So it's important to distinguish the two, but then both can be reported into the system. Then we talk to medication errors. And then if you look on my diagram still on the right, then it talks to a number of events that have actually been, that have taken place. Number one, we've got 45 children who became crippled due to poorly administered injection in Uganda. That's a medication error. It's an administration error. So that as well has impact. It needs to be reported. And this is one of the things that we're seeing, that they are not being reported locally, maybe because we are not necessarily talking much to it. However, it's one of the things that needs to be reported. Then 120 people have died as well from taking adulterated cough syrup. That talks to standard or falsified, substandard or falsified medication that took place in Panama. And then lastly, You have the ART patients developing pseudoprotein-associated anemia in Namibia. And then that's an example of an adverse drug reactions. So all this, they also needs to be reported. Interactions of medicines, abuse or misuse of medicines, overdoses, lack of effect, all this they needs to be reported, and they're all included in the scope of pharmacovigilance. Then I thought I should share with you the types of pharmacovigilance practice that are actually taking place, particularly in South Africa. So we've got 3 types at this point in time, and that's the regulatory, that's the institutional, and the public health. So each will have its own focal point. It will have the medicines under focus, the objectives, the methodology, and communication of results. However, some of them, they will still overlap because pharmacovigilance, it's a multidisciplinary practice, and then it's a multi-stakeholder practice. So some of the activities will interlink. So with regards to the regulatory authority, as we can see, the focal point is the National Regulatory Authority, and mostly we pay more attention to pharmaceutical manufacturers. Why? Because the Act specifically speaks to them to say they have a mandate to ensure that the safety of their product on the market. So in order for them to ensure that the regulator needs to be there to monitor that they are actually doing what they're supposed to do. And the Act further says that healthcare professionals, they have the responsibility as well, but they are not mandated compared to the pharmaceutical companies. And then with regards to the institutional, we're talking the PTCs, the academic researchers, hospital quality assurance department, and the pharmacy departments. So basically it's provincial going down. And then we've got the public health as well. We do have the public health programs that are based at the National Department of Health, looking at EPI, HIV, mother-child MCWH, I just forgot what it is, but as well, all this, they are part of the public health, and we work in collaboration with each and every one of this. At this point in time, we are working with the provinces so that we can harmonize pharmacovigilance throughout the country and ensure that we strengthen pharmacovigilance. Then the medicine under focus, from the regulatory point of view, all medicines that are available in the country, they will fall under the regulator. Institutionally, it will focus more on targeted drugs that are used by the health institution and outreach or satellite facilities or specific patient population. And then with the public health, they focus on medicines used within the public health. For example, the EPI, they look specifically at the vaccines, and currently the main concern has been the COVID-19 vaccines, but not forgetting the child immunization vaccines as well. We still do look at that. The objectives from the regulatory ensure marketed medicines are safe, effective, good quality. And that's exactly what I said when I introduced SAPRA at the beginning, to say that's what we are here for at SAPRA. From an institutional level, we minimize institutional drug-related morbidity, mortality, and cost. And then from the public health program, we minimize preventable harm and maintain trust in the program and the drug, because they would be more standard. However, with the regulatory, the main methodology, it's more spontaneous reporting and cohort event monitoring, record linkages, and with regards to institutional, minimized institutional drug-related morbidity, mortality, and cost. So I would, because we're going to share the presentation, then you have an opportunity then to go through it by yourselves, things. Then, like I indicated, that we will pay more attention into the regulatory pharmacovigilance. So I thought it's important for me to share, or for us to share with everyone, to understand what is it that SAPRA do when they say they do this pharmacovigilance thing. So within the pharmacovigilance unit, we are actually 6 pharmacists that are working within the pharmacovigilance unit. 2 have recently joined us, and then we've been actually 4 for the past few years. Oh, my apologies, we have actually been 6. Unfortunately, one of our members passed on early last year, and the other was transferred to another unit. So we were 4 for some time until we have the 2 that have joined. So we are 6 pharmacists, and all these functions are our responsibility. So the first one is what we call the benefit risk evaluation and management. So within the benefit risk evaluations and management, what we do is that we review the safety reports. I have highlighted to you that the applicants or the pharmaceutical companies, they are mandated by the Act to ensure that they monitor the performance of their product. So what they do is that when they register these medicines, some of their medicines, they will require the risk management plan to be in place. That needs to be reviewed. Some of them, they will require to have what you call the periodic safety updates report, so that we can see the global performance of this product on the market worldwide. Then those are the reports that they submit. And then they will alert us of any safety related issues that have been identified anywhere around the world. That will be done under the benefit risk evaluations and management. Then we'll have the Dear Healthcare Professional letters that comes as well as part of the risk management plans, or the educational materials that needs to be reviewed. And that's part of the risk evaluations and management. I might have not touched on all of them, but basically that's the gist of what happens underneath the benefit risk evaluations and management. Then we've got the pharmacovigilance inspection. This is a recent discipline that has been added within the unit. It's been done in collaboration with the inspectorate unit, where we do inspections to ensure that the pharmaceutical companies, they comply with the requirements of our Act in terms of ensuring public safety and the requirements of pharmacovigilance. Then we have the ICSR management. The ICSR basically stands for Individual Case Safety Reports. These are the reports that we receive from healthcare professionals, from patients, from any other person who would report. So within this section, basically they do everything that I spoke to earlier in terms of the activities: collection, collation, analysis, signal detection, assessment, and draw conclusions and communications. And then lately, we have also a site where we share the vaccine-related events that we have received. So they will also communicate those via that system that we'll talk to a little bit later. Then we've got policy development and management. This is where we develop the internal SOPs, the guidelines that we communicate either to healthcare professionals or these pharmaceutical companies. And basically it's quality management system that we do within this. And then lastly is the stakeholder engagement, where one of them is what we're doing currently, awareness and outreach. So those are the activities that basically takes place within the regulatory pharmacovigilance. Okay, so in terms of the procedures for adverse event reporting, which I think Refuda really touched this on this, I thought we should share the procedures for adverse event reporting. And we're talking adverse events, including any other thing within that, anything that relates to pharmacovigilance. We're talking all healthcare professionals, and that includes medical doctors, dentists, pharmacists, nurses, any other healthcare professionals who may become aware of any report, then they need to report. And secondly, the consumers, they are also encouraged to report all suspected adverse drug reactions, preferably via their healthcare professionals. But lately we have introduced the MedSafety app via the MedSafety app as well. Then what to report? What's important to note is that all suspected adverse drug reactions, they need to be reported, particularly those that are serious and those that are related to new medicines. And then what do we mean by serious? A serious adverse event is defined as one which requires 1, hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization. 2, it causes congenital malformation. 3, it results in persistent or significant disability or incapacity. 4, it's life-threatening. The 5th one is that it results in death. So those are the ones that we particularly advise that at least, even if you are busy, because we do understand, we've been there, we understand what's going on at the ground level, but if we can pay more attention to this one, whether they are noted in the package inside or not, that's irrelevant. However, these are the ones that we look at. And I've spoken as well earlier to new medicines to say any new chemical entity, anything pertaining to that, whether you deem it to be non-serious or not, we might not be aware of that, then we need to report that. Then the minimum reportable information for a case to be valid. So for a case to be valid, we need an identifiable patient, an identifiable reporter, preferably including contact details. It makes it easier for us if we want to make follow-up. I know many of the reporters, particularly healthcare professionals, they are not fond of us calling and then making follow-up, but it's quite important from our side so that we can ultimately make a decision that maybe is going to inform a package insert or any other decision that I've related to earlier. Then the third one is the suspect medicines, ideally by trade name. The reason why by trade name is because if we just put a generic, it's not going to assist much. It will just talk to a molecule, but you find that it might not necessarily be the active ingredient itself. It might be as a result of the other things that have been added to that particular medicine. So ideally, we prefer trade names. And lastly, the suspected adverse effect. And those are the 4 minimum reportable information for a case to say, this 4 minimum reportable information, they do not necessarily inform clinical decision making. So in order to inform clinical decision making, then we need further details like the treatment start date and reaction onset, dose and dosing regimen, indication, concomitant medicines and comorbidities, age and gender, action taken, whether there was a challenge or de-challenge or re-challenge, the outcome at the end, any additional clinical data. Other information may include discharge summaries, post-mortem results in case of death, relevant lab data. So these are all, this is all information that would make it a more clinically relevant case. Then how do we report this information that I just spoke to? So on my left-hand side, we've got reporters who are our healthcare professionals and the consumers. So from the healthcare professionals and the consumers, we've got few methods of reporting. We've got what we call the ICSR. Those are the individual case safety reports. So basically, those are the paper-based reports that you complete. They are available on the SAPRA website. They may be available at the institution where you are based, and you complete those. And there would be a process I would take for the institution in terms of how the reports would actually be translated to SAPRA. And then secondly, we have what we call the e-reporting. So the e-reporting is a desktop exercise. It's a reporting module to the system that we use for managing the adverse drug reaction. We call it VigiFlow. And so you go directly on the SAPRA website, and then you say, you want to report an adverse drug reaction, it will take you directly to that site, and then you'll be able to report. Then we'll have that report in our system. Then the third one, we've got the MedSafety app. And the MedSafety app, it's you download it on your Android or your on your phones basically, and then you are able to report, and the reports will be received directly into SAPRA. So we have another system that we call the Vigilance Hub system, but that's a system that we use for adverse events following immunization. So I will not talk much into that, but these are the reporting systems that we have. And then from the pharmaceutical industry, we have the paper-based, and we also have the electronic format, which is known as the XML format. And then all of them we enter into the system. If they came manually, we will manually enter into our system, the VigiFlow system, and commit them to what we call the VigiBase, which is the WHO Global ICSR database, where all the cases around the world pertaining to medication, they are collated, and analysis on a bigger on a large data basically takes place, and then able to identify signals more easier compared to a small data from a single country. And this is exactly what Africa is also looking into doing. Okay, so in terms of the adverse event reporting and management tools as well. We've got downloadable reports that I spoke to. So these are just the links on our website in terms of where to get all this adverse drug reaction. And then once you have completed, where you to send them if there's no process for the institution where you are, or if you are an individual, an independent practitioner, or then you can send them directly to adverse drug reactions if you're using paper, or you can download the MedSafety app and report via that, or any other system that I have spoken to. But what's important to note is that once you have sent a report, it shouldn't be sent again and again. Rather, you send an email for a follow-up rather than resending one case multiple times, because it creates duplication of the report in the system, and ultimately it will give us wrong results. Then it means we need to be looking at cases that looks exactly like that, so that we can delete it from our system, so that we take away duplication of reports. So I thought I should also share a little about pharmacovigilance communication. So from the pharmacovigilance communication, we have a website from SAPRA, and the website from SAPRA, it's got different sections. So if you go on our website, www.sapra.org.za, you will find there's a safety section. Within or underneath the safety section, you've got the safety updates, you've got an information, you've got the vigilance thereof, you've got report side effects, and then when you click here, this is what where it's going to take you directly into the reporting e-reporting portal, and then you have the COVID-19 adverse events reports thereof. So on our website, you will have a section where you find the guidelines under information and updates. There will be a section that talks specifically to healthcare professionals. This is where we post the dear healthcare professional letters that we share with you, together with the guidelines. We have a guideline here that speaks specifically to healthcare professionals. It's currently being updated. So we also have a newsletter that we share as well on our website. It's a VigiGuard, which relates specifically to pharmacovigilance related activities, and information about the MedSafety app as well on our website. And when you go underneath the MedSafety app, you'll find some of the trainings that have been provided to us by the MHRA, which is the Medicine Regulatory Authority in UK. You are able to register on the website and as well do those pharmacovigilance related training. We also recently have started to issue what we call the communication to stakeholders regarding the summary of medicine safety related decisions that the pharmacovigilance have done in consultation with pharmacovigilance advisory committee, and that provides expert advices to the unit in terms of regulatory safety regulatory decisions. So we have started issuing, this is our first issue that we issued on the 13th of June, and then we are currently doing the second one. So we issue that on quarterly basis together with our VigiGuard newsletter. And then we also have a dashboard where we are sharing the adverse events following immunization. And on this section, there's a number of things that we provide. We provide the adverse events that have been reported. We also provide the frequently reported adverse events, the serious ones. So there's quite a number of activities that are actually taking place on the SAPRA website. We're currently in the process of planning for the training that we need to provide to healthcare professionals and the public, and that will also be announced on our website. Obviously, we'll communicate with the provinces as well. So there are a number of activities, and I would encourage that maybe you go on the SAPRA website so that you can get more information pertaining to what SAPRA is doing regarding pharmacovigilance. So in conclusion, I would like to say that Pharmacovigilance is concerned about identifying signals, particularly when you are at the regulatory side. And this is based on the suspected adverse drug reactions that are derived from the patient's experiences with medicines as reported by healthcare professionals and the public. And the role of healthcare professionals in pharmacovigilance system is vital in ensuring that we monitor the risk-benefit profiles of this medicine post-registration through recording and reporting of suspected adverse drug reactions observed in clinical practice. Therefore, participation of healthcare professionals and the public is considered to be very important, essential to ensure, to enhance rather and strengthen pharmacovigilance system. So much effort by all stakeholders that are involved. And I believe it's a teamwork and we can do better if we do work together. And these are our contact details should you need more information, email addresses that you can also. And I'd like to thank you very much. And our question and answer session starts now. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Matlala. We very welcome the presentation, very informative. But before we start with the questions, I would like a colleague with us, if she can just share overall a picture of the presentation, or maybe she would like to share some things that maybe were left out from the presentation. Busisiwe, are you able to say something? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Hello, everyone. For now, there's nothing I can share with you. I think Ms. Matlala has said a mouthful, but you are also encouraged to check our website. And I've seen one question about if there is any medicine that was recalled from South Africa. So from the website, there is that site that you could see medicines that were recalled. So I encourage everyone to regularly go to the website and get more information. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Just one more comment, maybe from Mr. Johannes Mangane from my group, the Engineers Chemist. Johannes, are you available to add something to the presentation?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. What I would like to say, thank you to SAPRA. I have seen that they have actually put more effort in ensuring that healthcare workers can report adverse drug effect very easily. The move from paper-based into apps, and I think that will make it easy for healthcare workers to actually report. And I think what we need to do is to also now open it up for clients, the consumers themselves, because the focus has always been healthcare workers. And yeah, I think that would be a good move. But the presentation was well presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johannes, for listening to me. It's less than a minute. I'm very proud of you. Let's go to questions. Ms. Matlala and the team, I hope you're ready. The first question is how to report adverse drug reactions caused by complementary medicines since they're not registered. Would you want to take this question, Ms. Matlala?
Please unmute. Ms. Matlala, your mic is muted. I think we...
Okay, thanks. Actually, my network just almost lost me, so...
Okay, all right.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, but did you get the question? Yeah, did you get the question?
Yeah, the reporting of the complementary adverse drug reactions, complementary medicine related adverse drug reactions, yes. Correct. So with regards to the reporting of the complementary medicine-related adverse drug reactions, the process is still the same. You use the same form for reporting. There is nothing that's different. The system that we're using, actually the VigiFlow system, communicating to the WHO VigiBase, it accommodates the complementary medicines as well. So it's just that process, even if it's not registered. So we've got instances that where we do discuss the complementary medicines. There was an issue about cover at some point. There was issue about the anti-stacks. So we do discuss those issues. We have in our committee a representative of the complementary medicine committee in our committee, the Pharmacovigilance Advisory Expert Committee, who sits in there as well. So we do look at those issues as well. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. The second question is, do we as South Africa have any relevant statistics about deaths caused by medication errors?
I have a follow-up on that.
That's a very interesting one. I have indicated that we hardly receive any medication error-related adverse events. And unfortunately from our side, maybe due to human resource issues, it's quite difficult for us to do further research except through what we are receiving. So in our system, we hardly receive any. If I remember one or two that we received in our system. So we don't have that statistics, but I don't know in South Africa as a whole if there's none. But from SAPRA's side, we do not have that.
Okay, Dr. Mawela, what's the follow-up?
Yeah, because, thank you very much for the presentation. I thought it was quite comprehensive and very informative. I wrote just 3 questions, but now this one builds on that question to say, there are other systems being used in the country for reporting adverse events broadly. And I, for one, have participated, for example, in the review of maternal deaths, but also helping a number of provinces to establish patient safety incidents reporting systems. And I know that there are serious or severe drug mistakes that have happened before, but I'm not sure how the flow, because now I see the SAFRA system. It's a question around how then do these systems, the reporting of maternal deaths, for example, is through a different path altogether. And then your patient safety incidents, there's a database housed by a program within the Department of Health. You look at the HIV program, we also have some spontaneous reporting pathway. So maybe you can sort of make comments with colleagues around the plan, either what's currently happening or what's going to happen in terms of trying to pull from these different data sources. Because I do know for a fact, I can't mention scenarios, but I can tell you there's very serious mistakes that happen around the issuing of drugs in the country. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Ms. Matlala?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for raising that, Dr. Mawela, because that's a very important issue that we're looking at. We have recently started to work with provinces on harmonizing pharmacovigilance activities. I think I touched on it a little. And we had interaction with different provinces, not all up to so far, but I think about 5. And one of the things that came in those discussions is exactly what you are highlighting. So number one, with the National Department of Health programs, we do have a working relation with them, even though we're not necessarily at the stage where we are, we have concluded on our memorandum of understanding in terms of how are we going to ensure that all these reports, they are collected under a single reporting system. So we do have that discussion with them. And then in principle, we did agree. However, we don't necessarily, that is not yet in place. That's what I must say, basically. And then in terms of the other system that you have related to, from the province. Some we were not even aware of them until we had the interaction with the provinces, and then they indicated to us that no, we are reporting through the system. We are in that process of harmonizing pharmacovigilance activities and systems so that we ensure that all these are actually collated under one. And we have realized that for sure information is distorted because it goes to different areas, people with different motives, obviously. But what's important is that ultimately we should have this under one house, and then everybody can actually look at what they are interested in. So we are working on that.
Okay. All right. No, thank you. The next question is quite a lot of them, so just be ready. The next question is there any drug that has been completely withdrawn or suspended from the market recently as a result of SAHPRA's pharmacovigilance systems?
Recently, no. However, in 2014, 15, there was a drug called Synap Forte. It was a painkiller. Many of you would know it was containing proper, I forgot the active ingredients, etc. But it was a combination. And due to the cardiac adverse events, it was taken off the market. But it was a court case that took some time before it can actually be taken off the market. That's what I can remember as a recent, but it's not like really recent. That was 2015 going backwards. So recently, not that I can think of. Colleagues, please assist me if maybe I forgot.
Any takers from the team? Okay, I move on. The next question says, I would love to know why the monitoring of the adverse effects of COVID vaccines have been very poor. Many people are sick post-COVID vaccination, and we as medical practitioners are not linking their clinical conditions with the vaccination. So that's the question, the monitoring of adverse effects of the COVID vaccines, why the reporting and monitoring has been poor.
Sure. I didn't realize that we are doing a poor work. Okay.
That's a perception.
Okay, maybe I don't want to run away from the question, but what I can say is that we are working in collaboration with other stakeholders in monitoring of COVID-19 adverse events following immunization, particularly National Department of Health, and other stakeholders as well. So I think the challenge may have been that when the system came, we were not really well prepared as a country for something like that. And that has actually highlighted to us to say, you need to be prepared for anything, any tragic situation that may come, we need to be prepared. So when COVID hit, to be honest, from the PV's perspective, we were not really prepared. However, we have systems in place that we have put in place actually so that we can ensure the monitoring of COVID-19 vaccines. And I will say a little about it. And if Victoria is here, because she also has a closer relation with the National Department of Health and NICEC, then she can say a little. So what we did is that, number one, we started having meetings on a regular basis for National Immunization Safety Expert Committee. So National Immunization Safety Expert Committee has always been existing since 2017, and it was looking at vaccines, particularly for children. But then when COVID hit, they will have a meeting once a quarter, but when COVID hit, it moved to once a week. So every Friday, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, we have a discussion on COVID-19 related cases. Even tomorrow morning, I'll be in that meeting. So that's one of the things that we did. And then number two, that's where we launched the Med Safety app so that we improve the reporting of the adverse events following immunization. The patients don't have to go to health facilities specifically to report. And then thirdly, we have interactions with the province on a regular basis. We used to have weekly meeting. I think now they have moved to bi-weekly. All of us, including National Department of Health, actually it was run by National Department of Health, whereby we want to understand what cases are still lacking from their side, and then what information is still required. What's important to note is that we also have challenges from our side that are coming from the provinces. number one, the information that we receive for the case reviews and assessment, they are very poor, unfortunately. Not all of them, but in most cases we receive information that's very poor. You can't necessarily make a decision based on that. And then there's a lot of back and forth between the NISEC and the province. Then we realized that there's a need for what we call the PISEC, the Provincial Immunization Safety Expert Committees, to be instituted. And then we did that. So in that fashion, in that model, then when the cases, before they can reach NISEC, then they would have been looked at the provincial level before they can be translated to NISEC, so that we avoid the back and forth. So unfortunately, all these are taking place with COVID. We are experiencing this with COVID, and then we're seeing where there's a loophole, where there's a gap, and then we need to amend as we go. But from our side, we are trying to be honest to ensure that we respond. We are aware that there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of complaints, but we're trying to put a system, hopefully at the end it will actually work, to ensure that monitoring of not only COVID-19 but any other medicine moving forward will be improved and strengthened. I'll allow my colleagues to say a little on that, but yeah, that's the little that I can say in terms of COVID-19 monitoring. Thanks.
I don't think that was little though. Can you take us from the team?
If Victoria is here, I think she can add. I'm not sure if she managed to come because she's on leave.
I didn't see Victoria. I didn't see
You
Victoria.
didn't see. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
But
So that's where we will leave it.
Yeah, we still have a lot of questions, maybe just to push. Let's see how far we can go. The next question is the feedback when people are reporting ADRs through filing of forms as they did not receive any engagement. What is happening? What exactly happens when one has reported because they don't get feedback? If you can just be succinct.
I was expecting this one.
Yeah.
I should have addressed it in my presentation.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Okay, so with regards to the feedback, it's not an oversight, but it's something that's lacking from our side. We need to take responsibility of that.
Okay.
But what we have started doing with, what do you call it? With the Med Safety app, there's an acknowledgement message that goes back to the reporter. And then from our side as well, we have started instituting acknowledgement letters for those that have provided the contact details, because as a reporter, if you're not providing the contact details, there's nothing much that we can do. But if you do, we will provide you with the acknowledgement letter. So in terms of the feedback, this is where now we have or we are starting, because it's not something that we don't necessarily have a full process that's in place, but we are starting what we call the signal detection discussions, where we sit and then we discuss based on the qualitative statistics, what we're seeing, and then we identify signals. Then we drill down into the specific cases. And these are the cases that we will be providing individualized feedback. Unfortunately, we currently have over 60,000 reports on our system. We will not be able to provide feedback for each and every report. But the serious ones, these are the ones where we're going to pay more attention on them. And furthermore, from the NISEC side, we are providing individual feedback for the COVID-19 related outcomes of the cases that have been causality assessed. So that's where we are at the moment. I know it's a lag from our side, but we're working on it.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how are the pharmacovigilance inspections conducted? Does SAPRA have a standard form for such inspections? And how are the manufacturers, that is industry, performing around that aspect?
Okay, so as indicated, this is a new thing. We basically have guidelines that guides the manufacturers on the conduct of the pharmacovigilance inspections. But the most important guideline, basically, it's the systems guidelines. It's also available. So the systems guidelines will guide the applicants to say, this is the kind of system that SAPRA expects you to have. You should be able, your system should be able to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we come to do the inspection, we base our inspection on the system guidelines that the applicants already have. So it's an activity that started now in May. We only did a pilot study. So far, we have done the inspection for 2 applicants, and then we're planning to move to include more. So we're still in the transition process of having a process in place. So we are reviewing this process. We're going to have a workshop with the applicants so that the applicants can also highlight where they are not in agreement with us in terms of the guideline requirements, and then there will still be a review of the guideline up until we have a solidified system moving forward. So it's a new thing. We're still working on the process.
Okay. I think this one is almost similar to the COVID-19 adverse effects, so I'm just going to skip it. Do we report serious adverse drug reactions only, or do we consider those as not serious?
I have a follow-up on that one also. Thanks.
Okay. Did you get it, Ms. Matlala? So
do we report
serious? So do we report serious adverse drug reactions only? And which ones are those? Like which ADRs do we consider as not serious?
Okay, I think in my presentation, I indicated the serious ones: hospitalization, medically significant death, incapacity, and congenital malformation. Yes, the serious ones, it's a definite. However, it doesn't mean that non-serious shouldn't be reported. But because we understand the situation on the ground, as much as we do not have enough resources at the national, I know at the hospitals as well, it's not, they are not fully capacitated as well. So we appreciate if we can receive the serious ones, but all adverse events are reportable. Whether non-serious, whether serious. And then non-serious, we can talk about a rash that has developed, and then within 2-3 days it finishes. A cough, and then within 2-3 days it finishes. So those are the non-serious. So the criteria that I used earlier in my presentation of the serious ones, those are the ones that we encourage, but as well as the one for new medicine. So for new medicine, whether serious or not, we encourage the reporting of those. And new medicine, I'm speaking new molecules, not necessarily new generics, new molecules.
Yeah.
All right. I think we are left with 3 minutes. So maybe let's take my question, Rafid, and then maybe 2 more, and then we try and close. So I wanted to just ask as a follow-up on that, because I wanted to understand, you know, near misses. So near misses are not an event. An event almost happened. Maybe a wrong drug, maybe the way the drugs were labeled were confusing, you know, those kind of things. I want to understand how important are those in the pharmacovigilance space, or should we wait for the actual, you know, event to pick up that, you know, something that could have been avoided if maybe there was a way to report some of the near misses? And then maybe also make a comment around, because when we started with the HIV spontaneous reporting, health workers initially didn't want to report, and we picked up that it was because at the bottom of the form, somehow, you know, we expected a health worker to specify their name and where they are from, and maybe they thought there will be some consequence if maybe the adverse event was due to an incorrectly prescribed drug, you know. So yeah, near misses, but also psychological safety or just culture in the reporting system. Yeah.
Okay. Busi will do a presentation one of the good days on the medication errors. We actually had definitions, but I thought definitions are more textbook based, so we're not gonna put them on the presentation. So the near misses becomes part of the medication errors. Remember, the medication error, it might be something that almost happened or happened. It can be either or. And for the mere fact that it almost happened, there should be a reason why it almost happened. Like you say, there might be a package insert, not package insert, but the package, they look more or less alike. So we have situations where people have reported those, that this and this, they look exactly the same. And normally in the pharmacy, we put them next to each other, and then people would miss one and take the other. So those ones, they are very much reportable because that speaks to patient safety. Then in those cases, we relate them to the pharmaceutical company so that they look into either renaming, either looking at the packaging in the packaging of that particular product. And one of the things that we have also identified is that they are, I think they call them family names, if I remember well, of medicines. You find them, it's Mafura, Enalapril, Mafura, this and that, like that. And then normally when we pack them in the pharmacy, they'll be next to each other. They look exactly the same. So we look at those as well. And we are in the development of a guideline that speaks to that as well, to say when the pharmaceutical companies, they're developing these names, then they must look into the patient safety issues as well. So those are reportable. So the legality part of things, I think in our ADR reporting guideline, it's at the top to indicate that we will not institute any legal actions against you for reporting a reaction as a result of it might be your fault or not even necessarily your fault. So we do take into consideration of that. And we are aware that most of the people, the reason why actually medication errors are not being reported is particularly because of that, because somebody realized that I made a mistake and I cannot necessarily inform SAPRA about my mistake. There was an issue in, I think, Limpopo, where a child was actually, or in Tembisa, where a child was injected with, was it potassium chloride, if I remember well, and the child died. And it came to our attention, but even today, we don't even know who the person is. So you can even do it anonymously, particularly maybe for medication errors, because then it's more about the safety of the patient rather than you as an individual. Then the people who can do that, maybe it's the family, but when it comes to us, we're more about protecting the public rather than looking at who's at fault.
Superb.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Great.
All right, Laura, just one last question, but I'm just going to break into three. Hopefully, we're going to, the response will be short, because I think the three questions are very important, so that we leave them unanswered. Okay, the first one is herbal intoxications and overdose, when people want to commit suicide and they overdose. So do they report that? The second one is the integration of the systems, the EML app and SAPRA, the platforms to report ADRs. Just short, just go, I think go short on that one. I think, yeah, those are the two that I felt that you need to respond before we close down, we close off.
Let me start with the email app. So the EML app, basically it reports to the programmatic pharmacovigilance. And as I've highlighted, we are in discussion, and in principle, we have agreed to be using the MedSafety app as the main app for reporting. And the only reason why we are looking into MedSafety app is because there's an international standard of safety communication, which we call it the E2B standard. So the EML app does not necessarily conform to the E2B standards. So SAPRA could not adopt the EML app because of that functionality. So hence there was a need then for an app that speaks to the international communication, and we agreed on using the MedSafety app. And then in terms of the intoxication, did you say specifically the complementary related or in general?
There was one on herbal intoxications, mostly in the rural areas, and those who are taking medicines as overdose because they want to commit suicide. So can we report those as well?
Yes, please, by all means. The overdose, we do receive few there and there. I think there was a study that was done in Sebokeng in one of the hospitals. We only saw the paper, but we never got to receive those reports. But we do encourage that overdose as well, because, for instance, we are looking at the codeine being used by young children to be on a high. And that's some of the things that we're looking at. So that will help us to look at mechanisms so that we can prevent the use of such medicines. So now codeine, it will not be coming anymore in 200 mils, but in 100 mil, you know, such things. Should it be upscheduled only through a prescription or not? Those are the issues that we look at. So should we receive such? It actually assists in terms of protecting the public. Yeah, so we do look at those and we do welcome those as well. Complementary, we don't have much of experience with complementary, to be honest. We've got very few cases that I mentioned earlier that spoke to complementary. It's a discipline that we're still working on in terms of the regulations, the guidelines, but in terms of safety, we look at those as well, but we hardly receive much of those.
Okay, sorry, Dr. Mawela, this last one.
Okay.
Is it correct? Is it are we allowed to continue dispensing medication that we suspect of having serious adverse reactions to patients whilst the investigation is still pending? Last question.
Complex.
Yeah, that's a very complex one. It's a medical officer's discretion there. I can't answer that one. The reason why I can't answer is because you find that this is you look at the profile of the patient. Is it helping the patient or not? Is it safe in the patient's lives or not? So if it's something that's actually causing a bigger problem rather than resolving what it's meant to do, then obviously you would have to re-look into it. But if it's the other way around, the reaction is minor compared to the benefits, then still it's for the doctor's discretion to decide that I will go with this. So I cannot necessarily as a regulator say, stop the treatment. It's not in my jurisdiction to say that. But for me, is to highlight to the doctor in the PIL to say, it causes this, then the doctor will manage the patients accordingly.